Has been sent, Lisa.
Hi, I'm Lisa O'Malley, co-founder of the Carer Project, and I am joined by.
Leah. Hi, I'm Leah. I'm Leah Terry. I'm a foster carer um, and a mum of four.
And I am Kelly Martin. I am a kinship carer, mother of three, and also long-term guardian.
So we thought we would catch up just quickly tonight, and Leah and I were able to attend the Mental Health Coalition this morning. Kelly wasn't able to attend, so we thought we'd have a quick chat about that, and then I guess extend off into some conversation around some of the things that we heard there today. And so this morning, Leah and I attended the Mental Health Coalition at in Adelaide at the Pavilion, and what I enjoyed the most of all was a presentation by Kerry Hawkins, and she spoke extensively on the value of lived experience and the need for that to be at the table. Also, they spoke around some supports and things like that. So we thought we'd cover a little bit of that and share some of that with Kelly and anybody else tuning in. And then perhaps talk about some of the supports currently in place for carers and the types of things that carers were discussing and thinking about heading into the election. So did you want to start off with anything, Leah? Was there anything in particular that you found, I guess, most useful or value in from this morning?
Yeah. Anyway, it was a good turnout. I mean, I think there's a lot of people in the room. There was very different, I guess, lenses or views of what it was like to talk about mental health and the challenges around mental health. Well, I really enjoyed the first presenter, Lisa, that you spoke of, talking about a lot about carers' mental health and the impact of mental health, caring for, general caring, but caring for children in care. I guess teenagers, we're talking about just caring for young ones, the impact of that and the mental health. Now, it wasn't the mental health only just being a carer, it was the role of the burden of being the carer. I'm trying to think of exactly, I guess, how to put this into the context of what it is I'm trying to say, really, was the burnout, the fatigue, the lack of time, the lack of money, the lack of resources, the lack of ability to take care of yourself as a carer and look after your mental health. And whilst your mental health is, if your mental health is not, being cared for and I guess identified as a need, you're then too letting down on yourself, but the people around you, the role that you play in being a carer and the extension of that. That's what I heard a lot of those conversations and talk and communication around, how do we best support a carer? But then there's a lot of layers to that. The ability to be able to go and see your GP, the ability to be able to have those regular mental health checkup meetings. I guess also to saying you're struggling with your mental health is you're fatigued or in any way, the fear of saying that too did come through in the conversations as well. Carers or others saying, I'm struggling here right now, and the repercussions of that.
Yeah, I found it interesting. So Kerry Hawkins is the CEO of Community Mental Health Australia, and probably one of the best presentations I've been to in a long time, talking about the mental health of carers. And it wasn't necessarily fostering kinship carers. there were people in the room who were caring for their elderly parents or family members or a sibling. It wasn't necessarily somebody with a child protection connection. So it was really interesting to hear that those families were also experiencing a lot of what foster and kinship carers were experiencing, and the support that they weren't receiving, the needs reflected the same. And then the same, Kerry, you couldn't count the number of times where they spoke about the importance of lived experience being that expertise that needs to be at the table for the decision making, for the writing of policies, and not just for carers to come in at the end to see what I guess the paid workforce have all been working on, and then for carers to receive something to have a bit of a read and maybe give an opinion on, which is very rarely considered and used, and them, I guess, constantly restating that we needed to be at the table at the onset for the opening discussions, the planning on what was going to take place, what was going to follow, then at the table for writing up the documents or policies, practice, whatever it is that we're working on, and then to be at the table for the implementation and following through, reviewing that implementation and all the planning, which is exactly, I know what I've been saying for the last 20 years and what all the carers have been saying for years. So it was nice to hear that we're all asking for the same thing, regardless of whether you're caring for your elderly parents, you're caring for foster children. Everybody they're being exhausted by processes, by paperwork. And people in that room were also saying that we have all these government departments. So we could use, for example, Centrelink, taxation, DCP. Yet, despite them all having everybody's details, we are constantly exhausted by paperwork when the information's already in the system. And one comment I liked, because foster and kinship carers have mentioned it many times, is that, I guess in our case, children, when they have a diagnosis, why are they expected to prove that diagnosis over and over again at the cost of taxpayers? Because they have to go and have further assessments, updated information, updated paperwork. For example, if a child is ASD3, the child's not going to suddenly be healed of ASD at the age of 5. But we're constantly expected to come back and prove again in a few years' time. I think, when we do those, there's assessments carers do for care allowance and things like that. And you have to get all the paperwork, go back to the doctor, get more reports. The doctor has to fill in a report. The carer has to fill in a report, and which all costs money and a lot of time. And you fill in the paperwork, but really the only thing that's changed is that the child has gotten older and probably the need for support's increasing.
Yeah, you're right, Lisa. There's a lot of aha moments. There's a lot of that. You heard a lot of, yeah, oh, yeah, and head nodding and a lot of aha moments. Had while she was speaking, just incredible. That was and I just felt like she was talking to me and my experience, but the person sitting next to me, who I learned that was not experiencing the same life that I have, was yeah, you're right, yeah. It was a lot of those moments. So yeah, no, definitely, absolutely. I would recommend even just if you could watch some of, I don't know, whether she has videos or YouTubes or the likes, or there's resources, but wowee, like I definitely think, a bit of a powerhouse woman, speaking language that I certainly myself felt identified with. I saw others around the room too nodding. It was probably one of those moments where everyone was intently listening, not a lot of talking. Everyone was just still and really engaged with her.
I think it was the first time that we've heard any honesty in a long time.
It was really
And
good. Yeah.
she had her, let's say, report, her evidence from their research and all the work that they've been doing. And she didn't hold back in calling out government. on the lack of support and the lack of funding, the financial support. Someone asked a question around respite in the room, and the room went silent. There was nobody in the room that could say that they were getting regular respite, if any respite. So, we could shift that over into the foster and kinship carer community, because most of those carers are crying out for respite, any respite, let alone consistent and ongoing respite. So I just thought her information was amazing, and it backed up everything the foster and kinship carer community have been saying for a very, very long time. So
Yeah.
hopefully her work helps, I don't know, get someone listening, because how long can everybody keep ignoring us all? And
my thought goes, sorry. My thought goes to how like I've only been in the space of kinship caring for coming up 5 years. How are we still having the same conversations about what is lacking and what is needed 5 years later? Does our Premier know what is going on? Does he know how bad it is?
Well, I know I've spoken to him many times, and the Carer Project has done several polls, reports, over the last few years. So it's definitely it's not because there's a lack of information going in. Is there a lack of lived experience, expertise sitting at the reform tables? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, yeah, I agree. I think it's like if I was wanting to talk to someone about I don't know, say my profession was glass, and I was talking to someone about glass, but they were a chef. Like it really is not going to make much sense to them what it is I'm talking about if they haven't had the experience or the knowledge or the expertise, or even like it's impossible. It's impossible for anyone to understand what it is I'm trying to say if they haven't had experience in that field. And I think that's what's really missing. Like
Absolutely.
but it's not that we're not speaking up, and it's not that carers aren't coming to the table. It's just that, it's like it's in one ear out the other. Like, I don't know, maybe we're not called the experts. I don't know. I don't understand. I agree, Kelly. I think why we're having these conversations over and over again. I can't tell you how many emails I've written to everyone in our state. I mean, the only person I haven't written an email to is the King. But
I'm right there with you, Leah. I'm the same. Like I have contacted my Premier time and time again, and I have had nothing. I have written to everybody, and I had nothing. But it makes sense. Like if there's something wrong with my car, I'm not going to go and ask a plumber what's wrong with it, am I? I'm going to go to someone who has the experience to know, and that's what lived experience is.
Yeah, but I think as we've got it back to front, upside down, it's like we're the lived experience people trying to reach up to the people who, I guess, hold the role and I guess, are in power. But how can they possibly understand what it is we're talking about? I guess, unless they've actually lived the experience. Same thing as your car and your plumber. My glass and my chef. Like but how do we change this? How do we fix broken?
Well, I'm yet to see any promises that have been made, during the last election leading up to the one that so how do we change it? Who is going to listen? Because there is no lived experiences at these tables, and we all have access to social media to see who our ministers are meeting with and who is there. There's no lived experience sitting there. There's no one to say, this is what carers need to best support their children.
Yeah, I know personally. I mean, I've contributed to all sorts of reform work over the years, and I've never been more excluded than what I am right now. And it doesn't matter how many times you ask to be included or you send in feedback and information. I'm not feeling that any of the lived experience is being valued right now. And I don't know how many requests I have made to sit on the Carer Recruitment and Retention Task Force. That's a task force that has been going for several years now with no carers sitting on there. People keep saying that the carer's voice is being represented, but it's being represented by people who filter carers' information and then present it in their own way and with what they're happy with. These people like Kerry Hawkins, and people like myself, they've been contributing for 20 years. I've done all sorts of reform work. We're all saying the same thing. It's the grassroots lived experience, that expertise. And I always say it's not about what's in writing. It's about the implementation, and it's about the practice application. And the practice application isn't happening like it should be.
In my experience, I feel too like it is almost like if it's a fear of them having loss of control. They can't then control the narrative if our voices are actually in there being heard.
Yeah, exactly. And where do we go when things aren't working? Where do we go? Where's our place? Like if you've got a problem, you complain. I guess you write the complaint into the place where the complaint sits, but then you don't get the resolution, you don't get the outcome that you would expect. Where do you go next? What do? You're like a mouse in the wheel, round and round you go again. Nobody seems to want to take any accountability. There's no consequences, no action. It is just the same thing. I'm not just saying this. I'm hearing other carers saying to me, Leah, what do we do? What happens next? What do you do? What have you done? I hear you advocating, I hear you on podcasts, I hear you doing this and I see you out the place, but what am I supposed to do? I've had carers come and ask me.
I'd be interested to know, because there is nowhere, Leah, there is nothing independent. When you go and make a complaint, you have staff investigating staff in the same government body that they work in. I'd be interested to know, and I don't know where to go and find out, but one of you guys might know, is there another government agency that investigates their own?
I don't know, but
because people working for the same government body investigating each other is not independent. You're never going to get an outcome that is independent doing it that way.
Yeah, and that's something that carers have been complaining about for a couple of decades and requesting that independent mechanism, which is something the Carer Project worked on with John Daly when he was in Parliament. And of course, it was the Carer Project with John Daly that instigated and achieved the independent inquiry into foster and kinship care. Now, I remember the opposition at the time promised carers that if the outcomes from that independent inquiry weren't adequate, they would provide a review of the outcomes. So we have a change of government. Carers received the outcomes of the independent inquiry into foster and kinship care. Carers weren't happy with what came out of it because carers were looking for the independent complaints mechanism. They're also looking for government to take back that financial burden that carers are really wrongly bearing. No other volunteer in society bears the financial burden of the people they care for. So carers were really clear during all the feedback conversations. So they were writing submissions. We the Carer Project even held a forum with the Minister and former executive, and carers for the first time. I'd never heard so many carers speak up as they did at that forum, and were all really honest about what it was that was sinking them. And they were really clear that financial burden and that complaints mechanism, and also having some kind of rights embedded in legislation. Now, carers came out of that inquiry with none of those things. However, a government then refused to provide the review they promised of those outcomes. So carers they didn't achieve anything out of that inquiry. I know carers today that still comment about government refusing the review they promised. So that was a broken promise leading into the last election. Foster and kinship carers were let down again. And when foster and kinship carers are let down, the children are let down.
Yeah.
So they didn't achieve any of those things. So I guess that's something that was spoken about a lot this morning, was that financial burden, the lack of financial support, the lack of practical support. Now, we've spoken extensively about that financial burden for carers. And I always find the community and even some DCP workers are totally unaware of how little foster and kinship carers receive. So many people are of the impression that foster and kinship carers are paid to be carers.
It is a volunteer job, because
Yep.
statistically, a child in resi care, 700,000, a foster carer, $700,000 per year per child in resi care. A foster carer is given just shy of $15,000 a year to provide for a child. That's not a salary or a wage. That's just to provide the necessities that a child needs.
Well, it's a contribution to costs. It doesn't even cover them.
No way.
No. And
you've got carers, using savings, remortgaging houses.
Giving up work,
Yeah.
like leaving workplaces or not being able to hold their employment, their job down, because the need to care for the child in home, because the child is unable perhaps to go to childcare or school, which means the carer has to provide the care. But so not only are they financially dipping into their own savings, but they're also they don't have an income. Superannuation. It keeps going. And then we talk about back to the mental health and well-being of carers. So we come back around in a circle again.
What happens if we do put our hands up and say, I'm struggling, I need help? How are we looked at? We have the fear then of children being removed because children unsafe. It's a vicious circle and no one is listening.
Yeah,
Sorry, go on, Lisa, go on.
I think I can safely say that there are not too many members of parliament that I have not met with. And that's not just, 4 or 5 a year. There have been weeks where I've been in Parliament House nearly every day of the week, different meetings, different members of parliament, including the opposition, Labor, the independents. I've also met with the Premier. I've spoken to the Premier about the financial burden and the impact it's having on carers, and the comparison between residential care of, upwards of 700,000 a year per child compared to the contribution to costs for the volunteer foster and kinship carers. And, I compare for these children in residential care, if we start off with that $700,000 a year, that's just for those residential care costs. We also need to weigh in that, unfortunately, so many of the kids going into residential care, they end up having, engagement with corrections and police. Many, there's substance abuse, other types of trauma which occur and impact the kids. That increases their medical, their mental health needs. That increased costs for taxpayers. So if we add on to that 700, whatever it might cost for a child that does come into contact with corrections and police, is in and out of the hospital for mental health needs, and their physical health needs also, regress. I'd hate to try and come up with some kind of estimation of what that child actually costs. It's not just the 700,000. It's the impact on all the other services that child is coming into contact with. And then on top of that, it's the lesser outcomes. It's been well reported on for years and researched that the best outcomes for most kids come from family-based placements and kids being parented, loved, cared for, the consistent in care, the consistency in the relationships in the community as well.
Yeah.
Children in residential care, that constant turnover of different staff, There's many of them that aren't going to school regularly, so they don't have the school community around them. If they're not doing sports at school or out in the community, they don't have that safety network. Now, I don't know how many times we've all heard about the village that children need. Well, I think carers are doing their damnedest to try and provide a village for kids. But there's another part of the party that aren't coming to the party. And if we truly want to look at best outcomes for children, we need to have a look at all those costs, the cumulative harm to kids in residential care, the cost to taxpayers. And, you know, I think I've said a couple of times over the last week to people is what is it? What is the one thing begrudging carers of having those costs covered? And we're talking, and so my suggestion to the Premier was that all foster and kinship carers should receive the specialist carer payment. And that would be a much better contribution towards costs for the day-to-day costs. So at home, the water, the gas, the electricity, the food, you know, those day-to-day little things. And then in addition to that, government pick up the medical appointments, any out of pocket for any dentistry that might not be covered, you know, school camps, education costs, the connection to culture, connection to family. Government should be covering that. So the specialist carer payment teamed up with government accepting those costs is going to help both retain and recruit carers, and it's going to reduce the numbers of kids in residential care, and it's going to, I guess, increase the number of kids in care, getting better outcomes, and more kids that are going to go on to having part-time jobs, paying tax, contributing back to the community, and also perhaps more kids raising their own families.
Exactly, Lisa, and just the experience for the children. Like let's stay focused in the center of, you know, the center focus is the children. If you can provide a better support system for the people caring for the children, and the children are only going to benefit, because it feels like you're not paying the carer. The carer is not the one getting paid here. It's not a payment to. It's not a. I don't know. It's, you know, what carer takes the money and goes off and goes, oh, I'll go to the movies, go and have some lunch somewhere. It's not like that. It's not that. It's a contribution, like you said, of only a contribution of cost to raise the children. You know, one thing I must say, we first began to become foster carers, and there was a little child in our care, and they went to kindergarten, I was blown away that the department does not pay for kindergarten fees.
Yeah.
And they still don't pay for kindergarten fees. I questioned that, and I was told that's what your education payment is for, that you get.
But it doesn't cover it.
No,
It doesn't cover it.
No.
So that in itself, doesn't that in itself set up and look at how I guess, you know, at a young age, of the age of 3 to 4 years of age, a child is not being well supported in a family-based care environment. And that's where it begins. And I'm sure, I know for a fact it doesn't get any better than that thereon.
Yeah, and I have quite a few carers saying to me, you know, we asked for such and such to be paid for, Lisa. Maybe let's use swimming lessons as an example. Now, I've used swimming lessons as a safety tool. Every child should be learning to swim. And just because kids are in out-of-home care, it shouldn't mean that they're disadvantaged and they don't get that. You know, it's a skill, being able to swim. And I'll have some carers say to me, oh, we have our swimming fees paid for. And then I'll have another carer say to me, well, you know, I heard a carer has their the kids' swimming lessons paid for, but my office doesn't pay for it. And they said, you know, my office does things differently. They don't pay this, they don't do that, they don't pay this. And I say to them, you know, if it was a carer project that advocated and then via the Ombudsman had the DCP policies and manual of practice made public. So they're online now. Everyone in the community can access the list of policies and manual of practice. Those documents all apply to every office, every staff member at DCP, regardless of what office you work in, whether you're in a senior role or a very senior role. And I keep saying to carers, your office cannot do it differently. If that's the policy, every office has to follow it. But we are still finding, and we're seeing it on the Carer Project, aren't we? More and more carers, more and more carers are coming back again saying, our office said they do it differently. But the people having their special needs loading cut, that they're complaining it's being cut, and the reasoning that they'll give, oh, but our office said that they do it this way now. Or this child with this particular need, they only get this percentage of SNL now. That's not the case. It's based on the children's needs.
It is, but then you go back again, Lisa, where do you complain to? You can take the complaint to the department says, you know, I don't know, like, you know, and I think that is the next thing. We keep going back to, we can identify the issues, but we have identified that the system is not set up to really listen, to change, to navigate, to support, to help, to learn. I sometimes I'm lost for words.
And, you know, we also have where we're referred to like the peak body, and like more and more carers are saying, how is our peak body independent when they are funded by a bucket of money from DCP?
I was blown away when I heard that. I had to ask that question 4 to 5 times. I'm like, but they're called the peak body. They're independent, aren't they? And honestly, I still fathom scratch my head to think that.
I know carers that have been told, you know, at the end of the day, we can't go over what DCP says because we don't have that right. If you're not going to go in fighting and supporting carers independently, then how are you the peak body? Their bucket of money comes from DCP, and that is why more and more carers are not using the peak body.
Why would you want to use a peak body? Well, honestly, why would you want to use the peak body when you know that they're getting funded by DCP? It's the same as going to DCP to complain about DCP. No.
Yeah. Independent is the likes of Lisa and the Carer Project, who get absolutely nothing for the work that is being done.
And
that is shocking.
Yes, agree. But yes.
Again, like 5 years in, and the same questions are being asked, and like, you know, the same thing, the same outcomes are happening. That's just like, that's a version of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, not changing it, but expecting a different outcome.
Yep.
Yeah, we seem to, you know, I've spoken to quite a few people recently over the last couple of months in regards to, I guess, the research that's being done, what's not being done. We seem to be researching the same things over and over. What does trauma look like? What's the impact of trauma? And then we talk about, you know, support. What does support look like? I don't know how many times people think they need to ask a carer the same question in the hope of getting a different answer before they realise that they're not going to get a different answer, because they've not provided the support the carer's been asking for 10 years. They've not been asking. I mean, you know, we've had select committees over the years. We've had the Royal Commission. We've had economic and finance committees, independent inquiry into foster and kinship care, so many different reviews, and carers are continually feeding back what it is they need, and nobody's listening.
Okay, and another point I want to bring up is back to our peak body connecting foster and kinship carers. Let's not forget we have a carer council. I mean, that's amazing, isn't it? run by Connecting Foster and Kinship Carers that are meant to, those people on that carer council are meant to be our voices. I don't know one carer that is on that board. I know people that have applied, but how is that independent? Who picks that? Do you know who picks who is on the carer council? Are they voted in by carers?
No.
How is that independent? How is that our voice? That is run by the peak body who is paid by DCP. Paid.
Yeah, that's not sounding very independent to me. I'm sorry, but how do we make, like, Lisa, we've come here, we're talking about, like, obviously we keep identifying the same problem, the same issues, we keep going around the same circles, nothing seems to be changing, and we're talking about what do we expect, what do we want for change? The election's coming up. What do we do? How's our career community? I don't know. How do we come together collectively to get more, I guess, notice, to get a bigger representation of what our carer community needs? What are your suggestions, Lisa?
I've had quite a few questions from not just carers, but the broader community around, so the election's coming up. Who are we voting for? Who's running the election? And I guess one thing, especially since I got more involved in the last federal election, is the one thing I've learnt is that so many people in the community don't actually understand how the elections are really run and what it means when you vote. I mean, there are so many people I've met that think you have to vote red or blue. It's either Labor or Liberal. And they, even though they're aware that there's the other parties and independents, for some reason they still think that they have to vote for a major party. And my belief is, and I've said it to carers for years, is that don't wait for an election to come. Go and make yourself known to your local members of parliament and tell them what it is that's not working for you. Whether you're a foster carer or you're a tradie or whatever it is that you do, they are the people that are supposed to go into parliament and advocate for better for the community. So firstly, don't wait for the election. Everybody go out now and start connecting and finding out who is your local MP, who is your federal MP, what area, where is your electorate? What area does that cover for both local and federal? And then in the lead up to the election, have a look at and see what were the promises made. We'll talk about our group in particular, to foster and kinship carers. What promises were made in the lead up to the last election? Well, the review of the independent inquiry, that was one promise, and that was broken. And despite people almost like begging for it, it was refused. And I'll go back to the recommendations from the independent inquiry into foster and kinship care. Carers also weren't satisfied with the outcomes. They didn't just ask for the review as promised. The Carer Project engaged with a lot of carers. Well, we had a huge room of carers at that forum with the minister and the previous CE. So carers turned out in numbers. Carers also contributed. We had groups of carers work together. We were on the Carer Project collecting information, asking for feedback on the recommendations. From that, we put together some really clear recommendations. We also engaged with John Darley and his staff, and we firstly put all the recommendations together. Then John Darley and his staff did quite a bit of research into looking at what other more independent complaints processes were out there. So we came up with a structure, which was a really great starting point. And it consisted of, I guess briefly, like an independent guardianship board, supported by an independent investigation unit, supported by an independent care advocate. Now that independent mechanism was not just for carers. And that would be available to birth parents, birth families, grandparents. It could be a school teacher that's having some problems and needs to raise a complaint. You know, it wasn't just for carers. So we also put together what we thought was a really good starting point, and for discussion and for tweaking, was this independent mechanism. So we then had well over 400 carers that voted and signed to support the proposed recommendations for the review. We put those forward to government as a really good, well-informed argument for why we wanted that review of the outcomes of the inquiry. We also shared those to the peak body. Well, I mean, we actually asked the peak body to engage with us. And in fact, even back when we were advocating for the legislation, to get the legislation in Parliament and advocating for the inquiry, and they didn't support it. So we worked really, really hard, and we did all the groundwork, all the homework. The carers voted. They wanted those recommendations in place. And today, heading into the next election, we haven't achieved any one of those recommendations, I don't think. In fact, we were ignored.
So what happens now? Like, what happens next? Like, what, I don't know.
I know you're correct, Lisa. Like a lot of people that I speak to, you know, friends, carers, whatever, they think, oh, if I vote independent and independent don't get in, that vote to independent goes to whoever's winning the election. Whereas I'm gathering what you're saying is that's not correct.
Most people put together a how to vote card.
Yeah.
And it's I know one candidate in the federal election didn't do a how to vote card. They just said to the community, like, put me at number 1, and then you have a think about who is it you think is going to be, I guess, the person who would best represent you in Parliament on the day. Whereas others put together how to vote cards, they might have had a conversation with another party and said, well, you know, we'll put you at number 2 if you put us at our, you know, your number 2, and we'll scratch your back. And it's, you know, and I think especially the carer community working so hard with members of Parliament, we've seen the difference that it can make having a good selection of independent and minor parties in Parliament. So we've seen with the flawed bill, for example, the current opposition working closely with you know, the crossbenchers, all of those people working together, trying so hard, working with us, working with the other stakeholders, opposing the bill because it didn't represent what the stakeholders were asking for. And you know, that included the children's commissioners, the Guardian for Children and Young People, as well as, you know, the Carer Project and others, members of Parliament. You know, it showed how well Parliament can work together. The one problem we had was that they just didn't get the vote across to stop that flawed bill from going ahead. You know, so I think when you have government that holds so many seats in each house, it makes it really hard to get to make sure that any bills that are going through and being passed actually reflect the needs of the community. Because it's not about what a member of Parliament wants. This is about what our community needs. And I you know, I think we'd be hard pushed right now to find too many people that can put their hand up and say they're not doing life tough, let alone being a carer on top of that, with all the added burden, the financial burden of government, services being denied or withdrawn and funding being withdrawn, and trying to navigate all of that while carers are caring for children and most having additional needs.
Yeah.
You know, the time's come to like, come on, let's just do the right thing. Let's firstly, let's properly support our birth families. And when we might identify that families are doing it tough, let's not just go straight in there after them. Let's have a look and see what is it that they're struggling with? What can we help them with? And so we go in and we support families better from the onset, because if we can prevent any child from entering care, that's a bonus.
That's a win.
Yep.
Yeah.
But end of the day, we don't want any kids having to come in and live under a government and department.
No.
We want kids growing up with their families and breaking that cycle so that more kids are staying with their families. But then if kids do have to come into care, the preferable model of care should be in a family-based placement, preferably kinship if possible, because at least that keeps the children in their family. If not, it's foster care. But those two options should be more preferable than the easy option of, maybe residential care. Why on earth are we funding a lesser quality model of care when we have carers who want to provide care to these children but aren't being supported? And I've heard recently from a couple of carers that they're being told, if you're not coping, or if you want that funding or whatever, maybe they will just put them in residential care.
Yeah,
And
because that's the answer.
And carers won't complain because there's nowhere to complain to.
No.
And they're afraid of repercussions. I just wish everybody
yeah.
could see at the center of everything are these kids and families that just need to be better supported so we get better outcomes for our kids.
Yeah.
It's not complex. It's not rocket science. It's just about, just throw down the gauntlet. And it's not about power. It's not about controlling carers. It's what do these kids need? They're all unique. They're all individuals. Sit at the table with the carers, establish what they need, support the carers properly, get better outcomes for our kids. And in return, we're going to retain our carers and we're going to recruit more carers.
Yes.
Because our existing carers are free advertising. And if our existing carers are being well supported, they're going to go out there and tell everybody, like, become a carer. It's really rewarding and you are supported. But the current polls where carers are asked, would you recommend caring to people? Most carers are saying no.
I'm hearing you, Elise. Like, I think you've explained it really well about the independent, voting independent. I myself have reached out to many members of parliament. The ones that get back to me are the independents. The ones that really want to, can we meet up or have a chat or send an email back or, I'm going to, when are you available? I'd like to know more. And what I do know, Lisa, which I didn't know, and you've educated me a lot in all this, is that there's a privacy, there's a condition of privacy around members of parliament. So if you go there with your story, or you go there with, I guess, some kind of lived experience, can you explain just a little bit more about that? Like, if I'm going to reach out to my member of parliament, independent, and I take my story, because a lot of carers, a lot of people caring for children are worried or fearful of, not just telling the story at the same time over and over again, but what will happen if I explain or disclose that I'm having problems or we're having issues or there's, with the department or with government bodies, or when you make those complaints, like you said before, there's retribution. Sometimes there's consequences for that. But when you go to your local member of parliament or you go to an independent, is that correct?
My experience has always been that, and even carers that I've supported to go to members of parliament, the members of parliament have always asked the carer first before taking their complaint to, maybe it might be government or something. So my experience, they've always asked permission before they've sent something off. I say to carers, if you're worried about it, send in whatever the information is that you want to send in, and put a note on there saying, please keep this information confidential until you seek my permission to share it. And I find most members of parliament, they want to make contact with the carer because they want to make sure they've got the information right, get more information. And the more people that do contact their members of parliament, the more it picks up a pattern of behaviour. So it may be something's working really well. and people are talking about what's working well as well. So the members of parliament will also have a record of, one particular process that is working well. And perhaps we can then look at, well, how come that's working well? How can we tweak something else to work just as well? Or if something isn't working well, for instance, the special needs loading is currently is still a key theme. Despite, I think we did a review, we did a poll back in, was that one in 2024? And we wrote a report on that. And now we've just recently done a real quick snap poll on the page. And the behaviours and the things which are happening to carers are the same things that were happening in the previous report, like a year ago. So the more carers that speak up, and the more carers that perhaps go to their MP if they feel safer, saying that this is the current issue, or, lodge the complaints in the DCP complaints, because you've got to use something to keep proving that it's not working. Likewise for the Ombudsman, likewise for OPI. Just keep using them, and maybe you might get a good outcome. But if you don't, you've got your evidence to then show. Like, go to the Premier, go to the members of parliament and say, here's my example. I've exhausted every complaints mechanism available to me and it's not working. We want that independent mechanism that we've been proposing for years. So, carers need to lodge complaints to show it's not working. And also, most departments do an annual report and they have to report on their complaints. So if they're doing an annual report and it's showing a very minute number of complaints being lodged, it doesn't look like there's anything wrong. So, carers need to do that. But in the lead up now, so we've got the election coming next year. My advice would be to carers, we've been very lucky. We've had some members of the opposition who have advocated really, really strongly in regards to the bill and other child protection matters. They've sat on the select committee. They've just all worked so well with the, the crossbench. So go back, start contacting the members of parliament, remind them carers did not get the review of the inquiry outcomes as they were promised. And one thing I'd say to carers is you have your personal complaint, but if you're advocating to members of parliament for change, overall change, what we did as the Carer Project was we had a look at all of the themes of complaints that were coming through. And we kind of broke them down. And instead of being those small complaints that you could go and fix for one person, we had a look at what were the things we could fix, those overarching things that would actually fix that problem for everybody. And then we came up with those key topics that everybody's been advocating for, with that independent, complaints investigation mechanism, the funding for carers, respite is a huge issue for carers, getting some legislative rights for carers, court standing for carers. And once you put all those things together, all of these other complaints coming in were absorbed by those key issues. So that instead of just advocating for those little complaints and individual things, start advocating for things to be, like the systemic stuff. Let's fix the big stuff so that we get rid of all of the little things underneath. And the accountability and consequence was a major theme coming in from carers, that there just isn't any. So, find your local MPs, have a look at who's running in the election, and have a look at all the candidates, meet them, email them, call them. Most of them advertise that they might do, they'll do the community catch up on the street corner. There might be a politics in the pub. There might be a cafe catch up. There's always a way that everybody can contact their member of parliament in some way. So they need to start doing that now. Have the discussion, and what are you going to do for carers? Here's our key themes. This is what we are still struggling with years later. What are you going to do about it? And then start testing out who is the best candidate for you and for the community. Who's going to represent our families, our kids, the mental health services, the hospital, ambulance services? They're all the necessities. So which candidate is going to best serve your community? And that's who you want to lobby them all. And then you're going to vote for the person that's going to best represent your community and family.
And I think too, it's important to have these conversations with your extended families, with the adults in your families, whether it be your children. Start educating each other. Start coming together, and not everybody loves to talk politics, but it's not politics. It's what you're advocating for your lifestyle for the years to come. Like important to have those conversations. I think too, with family, friends, in whatever way it might be. Don't just ask them who they're going to vote for, but have you thought about voting independence? Have you ever, they're really important, Lisa. You've taught me a lot about politics and voting and the structure and the
I
way.
mean, some people might not even have, an independent, or they might not have whatever party it is they like. It's like, get out there and find who is the best candidate. And for somebody's electorate, that might be an independent, it might be a minor party, it might be the Liberal member is the best person, it might be a Labor's the best. But don't just go out voting for a party, because you're not voting for a party. You're voting for that person in your community that's going to, if elected, represent your community. Going into the federal election, I had so many people saying to me, I don't like Peter Dutton, I'm not voting for him. I don't like Albo, I'm not voting for him. And I said to them, but you're not. They're like, yeah, we've got to vote him or him. And I said, no, you don't. They're interstate. They're not even in your electorate. You're not voting for them. The people in their electorate's voting for them. You're voting for the person in your electorate. Like, so many people didn't understand that. I couldn't vote for them.
I think you're right there, Lisa. Like so many of us don't understand. I'm saying us, I'm saying me. I didn't understand it until I've been able to sit down with somebody who can explain it and take time to me, explain it in a way that I understood. I didn't understand it. Now that I do, I'm teaching my family, my friends, and having those conversations. And I didn't realize that. And I think it's that misconception, it's that belief, the old style belief that it's one or the other. But yeah.
You can't, like, for instance, you can't vote for the Premier unless you live in his electorate.
Yeah,
But people seem to think that they can vote for the Premier. They can't unless they live in his electorate.
You should do a podcast, Lisa, on what it's like to vote. And what votes.
I could get a group of pollies together and talk about that. And it's interesting. I have some people say to me, "Oh, yeah, I hate politics, I don't want to talk about it." And then they'll ring me up and say, "Oh my gosh, I need help with this. We can't get an appointment here. There's no mental health service here. La 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 la." And I'm like, well, guess what? You haven't voted for anything to be different. And then when you break it down and you talk about the services that maybe aren't available, or what's not getting the funding it needs, and then you peel it back down to, well, where does the funding come from? And who's writing the legislation? And who's running that department? And who's the minister for that department? And then eventually they go, oh. And I say, well, and that's why I've been asking you, what do you need? Go out and advocate for it. And it all boils down to politics.
Yeah.
I'm sure everybody would have better things to do than sit around and talk about politics.
But it feels good too. It does feel good when you get to actually someone sits there and listens and says, what is it you're bringing for? What is it? What are you passionate about? What is it what can I help you with? Why are you here? And I'm like, well, it's this, and like you walk away from there. It's not what I thought it was going to be. It's better than that. It's feeling that, the pen on paper, they're taking notes, and my experiences has been good meeting my local members of parliament, and then revisiting the conversation again, saying, haven't heard from you, like follow up with it. It's getting closer. Ask them how they're feeling about the upcoming election. That was something you taught me to do, and you can kind of get a bit of a good vibe, and you started engaging in conversation. And I don't know, it's I don't know, it's beneficial.
Yeah, and I think it's about some accountability. I've had so many people say to me, you know, don't politicians work for us? How come I feel like I'm slaving for them? Don't the members of parliament work for the community? And it's so true, they do. Um, and it is. We've got to hold them accountable. We've got to tell them what it is we want them to advocate for, because you can't hold them accountable if you don't advocate and tell them what it is you need. Then we have to make them accountable. You know, they shouldn't be voting for bills that they haven't read.
No, no.
I've had members of parliament tell me that they voted for the flawed child protection bill and they didn't read it.
No.
And that's despite carers email and lobbying members of parliament to tell them why they want it changed, why they want it amended.
I'm hearing
I've
you,
had,
Lisa, because I wrote into that. And I encouraged other members of my family once they read it as well. They wrote into that. There was no mistaking what it is we were saying was wrong.
yeah.
Yeah. And to Lisa, so I hear you say, like, our local members or members of parliament, I mean, we're taxpayers. My family's been taxpayers all our lives. My grandparents, my parents, like, it goes generations back. You know, I need to remind myself at times, yes, I do pay. I'm a taxpayer. My family's taxpayer. We're all taxpayers in some way. They work for us. We should be asking them for what it is we need in our community because they do. They're paid by us. They work for us. They're part of our community. We choose.
That depends on what member of parliament you ask. Because, you know, it's recently said to me that they don't view themselves as being paid by taxpayers.
Well,
And,
for
you know,
that,
my understanding is it comes from the public purse, and the public purse is full of taxpayer money.
it does, doesn't it?
Unless I misunderstand that. I don't know where the money comes from, but it is. It's about, you know, the community have to take some ownership over. You get what you vote for. You get what you deserve. You can't complain about what you don't try to shape. If you don't get involved, you don't advocate, you're not going to get the changes that you need. So, you know, all of us have to take a little bit of ownership over that, and we can't blame someone for not doing something we never asked them for as well.
No.
So, yeah, it's, you know, in the lead up to Christmas, politics goes quiet over Christmas. Before you know it, we come out the flip side, they're heading into an election. The community carers need to start now. Start doing their research, finding out who's already announced themselves as a candidate in the election. I would also say to foster and kinship carers to remember the members of parliament that are up for election who have supported us as carers and families and kids, because there are some members, especially in the Legislative Council, who have worked really, really hard supporting carers, and I'd remind them to check out the videos of you know, the members of parliament in action, and you know, I don't normally name people, but I'm going to, because there are some people in particular that have been so supportive of not just carers, but the other stakeholders in child protection and families. And you know, we've got Ben Hood, Tammy Franks, Laura, Sarah Game, who am I forgetting? Jing Lee. I've forgotten anybody in the MLC. But you know, there's the key people in there in particular that have worked really, really hard. They've made themselves available to carers, available to others, and you know, let's just remember the people that have gone in and advocated, who have listened, who have engaged. Someone actually asked me yesterday who was up for election. So, you know, my understanding is that we have 50% of the Legislative Council is up for re-election. And then we have the House of Assembly is up for re-election. So, you know, people can start having a look at who the representatives are in the Legislative Council. They're up for election, and start doing their homework, start contacting them, turn up at some of their events. You know, follow them all on Facebook. That's easy. Find them all on Facebook, click follow on everybody. You'll see some of their events popping up. You can just turn up and have a chat or email them. You know, on the Carer Project, there's plenty of email addresses and people for carers to contact, and you know, start doing their homework. Let's all take a little bit more responsibility for the people we have in Parliament, and you know, hopefully at the same time, you know, there's people out there having a real think about should they run again, like reinvent themselves, have a look at themselves, have a rethink, and have a think about what is it the community is asking for. And because there's plenty of us that want to work with them, want to support them, and want to do better for our entire community, not just for foster carers, not just for our children in care. You know, because better supporting the community is going to help prevent more kids coming into care.
Well, thanks, Lisa. That was a good
Wasn't
wrap
that
up there.
exciting?
Good wrap up. You know what though? It's informative. I don't know. There's lots to be said. You've got so much knowledge, Lisa.
There's plenty of people that know more about politics than me. So you know, if I'm wrong about anything, someone can comment on the video on YouTube when it goes up and give us the accurate information.
I like the idea of a podcast with the Pollies. I think that would be a great one to watch. You need to make it happen.
I agree.
If anyone can make it happen, Lisa O'Malley can.
Yeah.
We would be kind.
Yeah.
You know, it is. It's talking about how does it work? Tell us a bit more about the insides of. You know, I've spent a lot of time in Parliament House, but a lot of people haven't. So there's a lot of things people don't understand, and I think the more you learn about it, you know, the less boring it is. It's actually quite interesting when you start listening and you learn a bit more, and then you learn about how much more control the community could have, you know, depending on the different way they vote. And yeah, I don't know, maybe we can get some of the candidates on, maybe people that aren't currently in Parliament that are thinking about running, and maybe some of our people that we know in Parliament might be brave enough to put their hand up.
Yeah, that'd be good. That'd be great.
Yeah, I'm happy to contact my member of my area.
Yeah, likewise.
Yep.
All right. Well, the challenge is on.
The challenge is on.
All right.
All righty. Is there anything else that you wanted to say that
well, just, you know, once again, from the 800 carers that are on the Carer Project page being supported by you independently, thank you.
And as a volunteer, Lisa, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. As an independent volunteer.
Yeah. Independent volunteer, that is absolutely right. You know,
thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks, Kelly. Good to see you again, Kelly.
Yeah, good to see you, Leah.
Yeah.
All
Thanks,
right.
Lisa.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, ladies. I've just come back in just to get a clear view over who were the members that advocated for carers in Parliament. And I thought I wrote the list down, but I just want to double check. We've got Connie Benares, Laura Henderson, Tammy Franks, Ben Hood, Sarah Game, and Jing Lee. So not discounting others in there, but these are the main people that stood up and made videos that carers can watch on YouTube. And I'm wondering, Lisa, if you can put the links to the YouTubes in our podcast so that carers can go on and watch.
Yep, I'll try and look those up and put them in the comments. And anybody watching the video can comment in the comments below, ask any questions or message. I'll also put the link for the Carer Project page. So any foster, kinship, grandparent, OPG, LTG, guardians, specific child only carers, you know, they can also reach out and join the Carer Project page. There's also my advocate page they can join. You know, they can post their questions, message their questions, watch the videos, reach out to the members of parliament, and if they have trouble contacting somebody, either comment in the comments section. If you don't want somebody to see you asking for any details, they can message one of us. It's easy. We can help people out with any details they want.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks. Good night.
Bye.